Hello! I'm switching up the angle today, sitting in the new lounge, as we say, va? Some of you might be wondering how many rooms that I got in my studio, and the answer to that is 3. I'm gonna drop a link to my studio tour if you want to see that. If you're watching me for the first time, it's very easy to think that, I'm sitting in this big ass studio and I'm raking in the dollars and I'm, just living life, pressing record, that's it. Nothing else. I'm not doing any sort of work. Well, there has been a couple of things happening before I actually got to this point, and I wanted to break it down for you. Maybe you're in a position where you feel like you need some motivation for your own journey, just as I did when I didn't know where to go. When I was 14 to 15 years old, I was bullied in high school. I didn't like it. I hated to do studying. It was one of the worst things that I knew. I hated math and I didn't like Swedish, and I barely finished my English grade with just pass. And here in Sweden we have something that's called school duty, which means that you can't drop out of school. You can't drop out of high school. It's like illegal in the sense, but you still choose if you want to do it. If you no one can force you to actually go to school. But I decided to drop out because I didn't want to go. That was it. But dropping out of school is something that I probably wouldn't do today with the knowledge that I got, but I don't regret it. So I'm not gonna say that I would do anything differently. I just don't want my son to drop out of high school. But being 15, 16 years old and trying to get a job without any sort of high school grades was very hard. And that is where I started work with my dad. And nowadays, me and my dad, we have a fantastic relationship. We have a lot of fun and, we still have the ups and downs that every family members do with each other. But back then, it was entirely different because there was a lot of yelling back and forth and we had big clinches, stuff that didn't work out. And eventually it got to the point where I felt like, this is not gonna work. It's better for me to find something else and do something else instead of us just trying to fix a relationship that is unfixable. And I remember that my uncle came to visit one time and he said well, Peter, you should get a forklift's driver license because you don't need to have any grades to be able to drive a forklift. So I got the forklift license and then I applied for a job at a hardware store. And I remember that job was kind of what kickstarted my way into the job market, because without it, I would probably still be struggling. I don't know, but probably not. But it was definitely helping me out a whole lot. And I worked there for a couple of years before they had to lay off some people. And since I was kind of late in, they had to lay me off. And I was paying for an apartment that I needed to have money for, but I didn't have any money coming in because I got laid off from work. And I had to go to something that we call the unemployment firm here in Sweden, Arbetsförmedlingen, for those of you that are Swedish and watching. And I went there and I told them that I wanted to study to be able to get a permit to drive an excavator. And I think that was because I've heard my dad say that there's a lot of money involved in that, but it's also something that, will always be needed for the future because someone needs to excavate something somewhere, I don't know. And they said, no, we can't give you that. So I was like, okay, but what kind of options do I get? And they were like, you gotta search for 10 jobs every month and that's it. But as I was doing bodybuilding back then and had sort of a, Instagram account that I tried to grow within the workout niche, I also started a hashtag that was called I have the will. In Swedish, it's jag har viljan. And then I asked them if I could try to start a business around that and have them help me fund that. And they have a program that is sort of funding for new businesses when you're unemployed. So I think I got around 10K in total to be able to try to get the business off the ground. Needless to say is that I didn't really succeed because the business model that I had wasn't working out. I did not make any money from that. I just failed and I ended up with 0. And that is where I needed to find other jobs. So I remember I applied for all the warehouse, forklift, storage kind of facility jobs that I could possibly find. And that is where I got some of the absolute worst jobs that I've had. Not because, what I was doing, but more so because the bosses mainly were shitholes. They mainly were thinking that they were in some sort of high position because they were bosses within this warehouse and blah, 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 blah. But I was working on and off part-time jobs. I never landed a full-time job. I think it was approximately 4 to 5 years, and trying to just struggle along, doing my thing as much as I possibly could. And then I remember one of my big breaks, and that is where I got into Volvo. It's a huge thing here in Gothenburg, Sweden. One of the biggest employers in Sweden, actually. And I got this job where I delivered parts to the assembly line, driving sort of like a small forklift with a little bit of a, trailer in the back. I was doing that for 2.5 months, and the boss told me like, "Hey, Peter, thank you for doing a good job." And then after the summer vacation, I got back, worked for half a week, and then the boss came up to me and said, "Peter, we need to have your grades, like your high school grades." And I'm like, "Well, I don't have any." And then he said, "Well, I'm sorry, Peter, because this is the demand from the company that everyone that works here needs to have the grades. So unfortunately, we can't keep you." And I think that this was back in 2014 or 2015. So what I did back then was I tried to search for even more jobs, trying to land a full-time job. I didn't. I kept struggling along with my part-time jobs, trying to make money so that I could go around. And I remember the cars that I was driving were some of the absolutely worst cars that you could buy. It was like Opel Corsa 92. One of those cars where you can buy for like $150, $200. Those were the kind of cars that I could afford and that I was driving in. But I don't really care because, a car is a car. If it takes me from point A to point B, I'm satisfied. But moving back to the part-time jobs and then just struggling with that while I was doing my bodybuilding thing and then trying to get my own business off the ground was not an easy task. And some of you might probably know that the entire reason that I picked up a camera was because I wanted to take some product photos for my own clothing line. And the clothing line never took off. And one of the biggest orders that I placed was actually with a loan from the bank with a very high interest rate. And I do not recommend you do that. If you have a good idea, make sure that you have the money to put down for it, because ending up with a big debt is not something that I would recommend if you can avoid it. But I remember when I landed a job on DHL Express through one of my acquaintances, and I thought to myself that, you know what, I want to provide as much solutions as possible. I want to try to be as efficient as possible. I want to make sure that I do my utmost during the hours that I'm working, because we only worked from 5:30 to 9:30 a.m. That was it. That was all the money that I had coming in for a long period of time. And I think it took me 1 or 1.5 years until I actually got a full-time part on DHL Express and managed to go from being a part-time employee with the mindset of trying to be the best employee that I possibly could to actually become a supervisor through the end of my career on DHL Express. And now I'm sitting here and looking back at all the things that I've been through. It's kind of weird to think that having a shift in your mind is sometimes all it requires to make the biggest of changes. If I wouldn't have shifted my mind to try to become the best employee, or if I wouldn't have picked up a camera and actually tried to become the best at using a camera, and I'm not saying that I am, because there's people that are way better than me, but I'm trying every day to pursue progress within this field of work that I'm doing, I probably would still be struggling trying to find a part-time job so that I could pay my rent. And if you're watching this thinking that you want to pursue your passion or you want to do something else and you don't want to do the same thing that you've been doing for the last course of 10 years, then don't. It's all up to you. Don't sit home and watch Netflix when you get home from work. Try to make something productive instead. And when I think back at the immense amount of hours that I have tried to learn a camera and, learn how to edit and try to figure out how to use this and make money from this, it is mind-boggling. And I love the fact that I can be just a small part of your life, provide you with some sort of entertainment or enjoyment or whatever it might be. And I'm humbled by the fact that you're sitting here watching this video, hanging out with me when you have hundreds of other things to do. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for actually sticking around and being a part of the journey that I've been on. And I don't really know what the entire point with this video was, except for that I wanted to share that I'm human too. I've been through a bunch of struggling and I've never been taking anything for granted. It has been hard work and work ethic. And most importantly, consistency. That has powered me through this entire thing. With that said, if you've been watching all the way until this point, I have not taken a vacation for the last 4 years. I have been working almost every single day of the entire week for the last 3.5 years. And now I'm actually gonna punch out. I'm probably not gonna record any sort of videos until 2.5 weeks from now, which feels good. But I appreciate you watching, and I'm probably gonna do some live streams for those of you that bought the course. And by the way, freaking amazing that so many people are finding enjoyment and progress when buying the course. I'm gonna drop a link if you're interested down below. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate you. And I will see you during the middle of July, towards the end of July maybe a little bit before that, but if not, I'm just taking a little bit of a break. I'll be back soon. Take care for now. Ugh.